Hello, do you know what's better than having me at the beginning of the weekly? Nothing. Haha, worship me, hit like for Bob. But you know what is also cool? Ruining the bots.
Oh, turned. There they are. Trying to reestablish themselves. But will you? Will you? Yeah, this bot just broke. Like, they're not even trying. Villainy! Zombie help? Yes, I can't see this. See this right here? This is like the kill alley. Right here, this bend. When the bot comes around, like they're just done. Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to Warcraft Weekly, the last weekly until the launch of Shadowlands, and then everything's gonna be different because then we'll be talking smack about post-launch Shadowlands. Yeah. So thank you, Brutosaurus Squad, thank you, patrons, and thanks to the nobody who has joined recently, but I can feel your guys' spirit. It's all warm and slightly corrupted. This week, patch 9.0.2 dropped with very little fanfare. What came were loads of small changes that didn't make it into the 901, like missing horns from helmets that weren't intended and should be fixed by the time you watch this or soon after. Now, I totally get the backlash behind it. Folks like Tauren and their iconic horns ought to show, and it makes no sense to remove them. Eyebrows, on the other hand, remain to be the hardest substance in the Warcraft universe. Seriously, like, instead of tearing it in two, Sylvanas should have just put the helmet on, and then we'd all watch it split into pieces. Maybe in a later expansion we'll have the strongest legendary weapon ever created, the Sindori Cleaver, made from 1,000 eyebrows recovered from past wars. I know, I'm talking about this one at length. I have criticisms too. Anyway, even though the patch dropped on its usual day, players were pleasantly surprised to see the second part of the Death's Rising campaign unfold a day early, unleashing more quests, which means yay. But for real, I think I know what fans would have rather have seen: more cinematics of Jaina and Thrall and Bane getting tooked like a bunch of punks, and to see Tyrande do that thing she did to Nathanos' demon pups. That would have been... yes. The real treat, though, was the return of the greatest / worst event in all of World of Warcraft, the zombie invasions. Sure, there were moments, player versus zombie action, capitals brought to their knees, you know, kid stuff. For me, it was two things. One, it was to watch the takeover of Suramar and other areas that were spared from the original Scourge invasion because, you know, they weren't around at the time. We get to see a fascinating look at one game system not just murdering the other, but spreading like a virus. It's almost poetic from a zombie point of view. The other great pleasure from this event, it was moments like this. He's stuck. Come, zombies. Oh, you brave bots and their less than intelligent operators running these things, when we totally have the power to absolutely ruin them. In a bit of non-news, the handoff of Curseforge from Twitch to Overwolf scared the bejesus out of fans for like a couple of days. In a statement, the Curseforge team announced that starting November 24th, their support and manual moderation of add-ons would be closed, and that from the 30th till early December, the site would be read-only, meaning that no add-ons would be updated until early December later that week. Unfortunately, the internet played telephone, and the messaging was twisted into OMG, Curseforge would be literally unusable during the week of Shadowlands launch, which was misleading, but oh well. Too late, the damage was done. Since then, after some background shenanigans, Curseforge made a new announcement that while the site will still go into a read-only mode on the 30th, there's going to be people on hand to moderate updates to existing add-ons. However, they won't approve brand new add-ons to the site until this whole transition period is over. You remember a month or so ago when the fans railed on Blizzard for delaying the launch of Shadowlands to the week of Thanksgiving? Like, OMG, J. Allen Brack doesn't care about family time, right? But it's totally okay to cancel Thanksgiving for the people who host add-ons because it's just Twitch and Overwolf. Fuck those guys, right? This week marks the final week when we refer to the Shadowlands as beta. Well, probably not. But it's coming next week, worldwide, on the 24th or the 23rd if you live west of Europe. Dozens of players around the world will be standing where they need to start leveling, probably on their big old Brutosaur mounts. And many are going to be streaming it, including me. I'm going to be on an hour or two before launch, and I'm going to stream the entire leveling experience, so feel free to follow and put me in your channel flipping rotation. This is it. This is the final week of hype and last minute news, and there's a really healthy mix of excitement, as in the kind that's both happy and rage-inducing, so here's the skinny. Legendaries and farming Torghast have been adjusted to be less of a race that we've got to hyper-focus on. You can call it time gating too, sure, but here's what's going on. Torghast is almost immediately available day 1 of Shadowlands, since technically it launches before the first official reset, but the vast majority of us are going to be leveling anyway. But here's the thing, folks, only the first 3 layers of difficulty will be available in week 1. Week 3 will bring us 2 more layers, and at the start of week 4, which is the day Mythic and Raid Finder Nathria launches, difficulties are then fully opened up for everybody. I get that this slows down the rate of legendary acquisition for everybody, but at the same time, I feel pretty relieved that the pressure has gone way down. Now we've got plenty of time to settle into the mix of what to do, arrange our priorities, and most importantly, farm for the materials and the legendary recipes that we also need to craft legendaries. Don't forget about that. Engineers are having a bit of a laugh/cry over the nerfing of gun shoes in the Maw. Gun shoes are a Legion consumable made by engineers that help you move super fast in outdoor zones, but while in the Maw, they're no longer usable. Blizzard's made it pretty darn clear numerous times ever since we discovered that mounts wouldn't work in the Maw that by its design, the Maw is an inconvenient place. Some might say the experience of moving slow is literally a disease that kills hundreds of thousands of people a year, but I think it's because you just want to run past mobs with impunity, just my opinion. The big takeaway from this is to reconsider how we prepare or over-prepare based on what we see in the beta. Like, remember how excited I was about the Relic of the Past reagent? Yeah, well, that went out the window. At the same time, there's obviously an industry of over-preparedness, so for those who've made boatloads of gold, well, carry on. The Great Vault, or the Weekly Wall of Rewards, whatever you want to call it, will debut at the start of Season 1, and it's going to be up to us to fill it out with as many gear choices as our body is willing. A change happened on the PvP side, or PvP row of things. Clever, no, okay. At first you need conquest points to start filling out slots, but it's been since changed to honor, specifically honor earned from rated PvP, which basically means only arenas and battlegrounds. Regular battlegrounds, skirmishes, and war mode stuff is left out. So I'm of two minds on this one. For one thing, I'm like, oh well, I guess I'll pretty much never see anything on that bottom row. I might as well just delete it or something. But I'm also like, haha, good, this'll separate the real players from the entitled rabble. I don't really think that this move is Blizzard's way of encouraging more players to get into rated content because, well, straight up, that's just a bad idea. With this, there seems to be a clear and almost punishing separation between rated and non-rated PvP. Notice that the Great Vault doesn't give a damn about what we do in heroic dungeons, and this cements the narrative that all of non-rated PvP is treated the same way. But I'd love to read some of your folks' responses to this if you've got skin in the game. Numerous interviews, mostly from Hazzikostas, mostly sourced from Wowhead, have been surfacing over the past few days, and there may be more. It's been daunting, sort of confusing, maybe overwhelming, but in there were highlights and bits of useful information that I threw together, and I'll try to cover these briefly. We all learned about how covenant switching works. If you leave for a new covenant, cool, it's instant. If you want to return to the one that you left, it's not so instant. It's not a certainty, but it's on the table that if, in a patch, if there are any significant changes or tuning to Covenant, they can sort of reset that state, where we can switch without penalty even if we did so before the patch. Tier sets are planned for later in the expansion, and art is already being made, according to him. But the specific wording was tier sets, which were mostly appreciated, and not set bonuses, which was a bit more of a mixed bag. Renown catch-ups are meant to be gradual. That is, if you're super behind, you're likely to get renown from activities, but once you get closer to being caught up, not so much. So in practice, if you were to switch to a new covenant mid-season, it'll take you a few days to get yourself situated in terms of soul binds and perks, and in a couple of weeks, I guess you'll be just as progressed as you were in your old Covenant. Keep in mind that when you switch back to a Covenant that you previously left, the renown and perks that you had at the time will all be retained. It has been reiterated that the Flight Master's Whistle will not be a thing in Shadowlands, which I only find a little bit disappointing considering the lack of flight points in Bastion, but the reason for the whistle, which is to pump through world quests and emissaries, played a big factor into why the whistle was a thing in the first place. Covenant callings aren't quite the same thing as emissaries. You can fulfill requirements from a single dungeon run or a world quest, for example. Meanwhile, we got another reminder that unlocking flight will be tied to Covenant renown and not reputation, which makes Pathfinder all but passive progression, unless you don't care to go out and do stuff. Otherwise, well, why do you need flying? Real talk though, I've heard plenty of complaints over the forced rep grinds for flight. I've given my own take on why it was lame to have 2 Pathfinder achievements in BFA that were required but had nothing to do with each other. But then in patch 8.3, it didn't even matter anymore because flying was a legacy unlock in the relevant zones. I can live with renown, and for people coming back mid-expansion in Shadowlands, they won't be going out of their way to unlock flight. It's going to be a nice overlap, and I think people will appreciate that. Between the 20 raiders per team who will be raiding in Castle Nathria, a whopping 3 pieces of gear will drop per boss, a significant drop-off when you consider before it was 5, and now all gear slots are once again in play. So goodbye Heart of Azeroth and Cloak of Asheron's Call, or whatever it was. It's a small consolation that in general the Great Vault will give 1 piece of gear based on the number of bosses killed, and hopefully it's going to be good. See, if there's a time for someone to call Blizzard out about extending our subscription time artificially, this is the avenue of attack and not nerfing gun shoes. Ooh, the walking. Along with the reduction of loot from Mythic Plus, we're returning to a less familiar but not unheard of philosophy where there's only one version of gear. It's not the Titanforge corrupted ring with a socket any longer. We haven't had this since 2013 when Thunderforged gear first came along, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out so many years later. Back to the Great Vault again, we learned that when it comes to raids, what you see in the Great Vault will be based on only the first 8 bosses of the 10 boss raid. That is, until you defeat those final 2 bosses, and then those loot tables will be added to the pool. This is so we can avoid the RNG of killing only a few bosses on Mythic and then trying to hope that you get the best loot because those drop at a higher item level. My question then, why not have an unlock system of sorts for like everything? Think of it like this. What you get from the Great Vault when it comes to raids and maybe even dungeons is based on what content you have seen. If you cleared this and this dungeon, the loot from that dungeon gets added to the pool. If you only killed 1 boss in Nathria, you'll only see that 1 boss's loot table. I suppose it would get a little bit gamey though, like I'm sure that some people would have an idea to blacklist dungeons or raid bosses so that they could, I guess, avoid getting certain loot from the vault. It sounds kind of dumb, but the fact that I thought of it means someone else must have thought of it, and the best approach to that is, well, screw the idea. And yeah, thanks for coming to my TED Talk, and that's the show. It'd be a real injustice to not acknowledge that the Blizzard team has been speaking out a lot on Shadowlands this week, from the design philosophy to how they look at the metagame to whether investor metrics influence design. I'm gonna link the Wowhead article that covers all of that, but like I said, I wanted to highlight the things that will mostly affect us next week. Hyped? I'm like drooling here. Hyped doesn't quite cover how I'm feeling right now. Maybe I'm hungry, I don't know. If you haven't already, you can check out the super high-res cinematic featuring some of Shadowlands' characters. There's a new short story from Robert Brooks that covers the Lich King's 4 Horsemen. I just read it before doing this weekly, and it's pretty darn amazing. The press team unleashed a massive kit of media with 4K pictures, concept art, and more, and I'm gonna link all this stuff in the video description. And just a little bit ago, Blizzard clarified the timeline of what's going to go down in just a few days. The anniversary event and features will end 24 hours before Shadowlands launches. The pre-patch stuff will end an hour before launch. Mythic Keystones and dungeons and whatever will shut down half an hour before launch. When Shadowlands goes live, our Honor and Titan Residuum will be converted into gold. So spend that stuff now while you can. And that's it. Once the launch happens for a few weeks, we're just off to a new world, new story, and probably a lot of the old drama. Hopefully the guides that I've been pushing out, some of which are slightly outdated, have helped, and they'll be more useful to you once you get some more of the context behind Covenant and Torghast, so be sure to revisit those guides again just in case. Of course, stay tuned for launch coverage. It should be exciting, and by exciting, I mean it might be a total disaster with tons of drama, but exciting nonetheless. It has been an exhausting but an extreme pleasure to have been at least one source for your Shadowlands coverage, and I can't thank you enough for being here. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed yourself. Consider supporting me on Patreon and to subscribe for more of this and all things Warcraft. We'll see you in the Shadowlands. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.